Reconciliation. Everfree Castle was ruined, the very fabric of reality around the area damaged beyond repair by the powers of the warp. Now, Celestia had moved to Canterlot, and slowly Equestria began to recover from the horrors of war. Ponies began to move and resettle damaged lands, the legions had begun recruiting new soldiers to return to their full strength, and Maynaden was rising from the ashes more magnificent than before. Celestia herself was a different matter. She sat in the room that was to be her personal quarters, looking up at the night sky. She had not moved from that spot for almost 3 days, and a few platters of uneaten food surrounded her. Her wounds ached as they healed, but she cared not for physical pain. She had dealt with enough during her time on the Golden Throne. This was nothing in comparison. As if physical pain could overwhelm her emotional plight. Silently she sat, looking at the moon and the image of her banished sister, their last moments playing over and over in her mind. A small part of her wanted to be proud of Luna, that she would sacrifice her well-being for the good of Equestria, but the rest of her was a storm of anger and sorrow. She was so entrenched in thought that she barely noticed Philomena land on her shoulder. "Where did I go wrong, Philomena?" she asked once the phoenix had made herself comfortable. "I did everything I could think of, and she was still swept up by the powers of chaos. Am I just doomed to watch my children fall one after the other?" Philomena chirped in response, but Celestia just shook her head. "But it is my fault. I should have seen the warning signs. I should have listened to Luna. I should have just talked to her and told her how proud I was of her. I should have done the same for Horus." She looked down at the floor. "Where did I go wrong?" Another chirp. "I've tried, Philomena. I've tried everything to try and get in contact with Luna. But every time I have tried, I have failed." A chirp. "Why bother? I know that I have failed, perhaps this is a fitting punishment." Philomena scowled and chirped again. "Fatalistic? I am not fatalistic. Celestia stopped herself. She had never given in to defeat so quickly before, why would she do so now? "I'm tired, Philomena. All these millennia, and I have never stopped fighting and building. Now, I don't want to fight anymore. I'm tired of being the Empress, Philomena, of seeing all my work undone by one overzealous follower or one bad mistake. I just want to be myself, Celestia, not an overlord." Philomena stroked the back of Celestia's mane and chirped again. "Maybe this is a new beginning for me, Philomena. But Luna is still gone, and I have no way of getting her back." She looked back up to the sky, fixing her gaze upon the moon. With a sigh, she closed her eyes and thought back to happier times. Celestia was awoken by a crash from deeper in the cave. She got to her hooves as quickly as she could and hurried towards the sound, cursing herself from making her armor so bulky. She entered the cavern where she kept her genetics lab and found Luna surrounded by broken machinery, crying her eyes out. "What happened, Luna?" I am sorry, Tia." Luna sobbed. I was just playing around and I tripped and Tia, I am sorry." "Oh, Luna." Celestia reached out with her powers and cleaned away the mess before kneeling before Luna. "Don't cry, Luna, it was an accident. I can replace this equipment in due time. Please, Luna." Luna kept on crying, falling back on her rump while her tears collected in a pool around her. Celestia reached out again, but thought of a better alternative. Slowly, she began to take off her armor, setting the pieces aside to collect later. Once she had taken off her armor, she reached out with her hooves and picked up Luna, cradling the younger filly in her forelegs. "Please, Luna, don't cry. You didn't do anything wrong." Luna's crying died down to sniffles, the young pony looking up at her big sister. But all the things I broke dash. As I said before, that can be replaced." Celestia smiled. "Do you think a few pieces of equipment are more important to me than you?" "And no." Luna wiped her nose. "I'm still sorry, though." "I know, but I forgive you, Luna, you do not deserve to be punished for a little thing such as this. Come." Celestia beat her wings a few times, rising off the cave floor and flying towards the entrance. "I have something I want to show you. Hang on tight." Luna nodded and wrapped her hooves around Celestia's neck as the older mare left the cave, slowly rising into the air. They cleared the treetops and continued on, Luna's grip tightening as they rose higher. As they broke through the clouds, Luna let out a small gasp. The sun was setting before them, casting a kaleidoscope of oranges and golds across the sky. Small flocks of flying creatures flew past, Luna watching them as they went by. "Wow," Luna whispered. "I've never been this high up. It's so pretty." "I'm glad you like it, Luna." Celestia looked ahead, tracking the sun as it set. "But I know something that is more beautiful than a sunset." "What?" "You." Celestia raised Luna up so that the younger pony was at eye level with her. "You are the most amazing filly I have ever seen in my life. Your potential is beyond what I would have ever guessed, and you possess a kind, loving, and curious soul, and I could not ask for a better pony to call my sister." Luna smiled. "You're pretty too. And you're really smart and nice and everything." Luna squirmed until she had wrapped her legs around Celestia's neck, pulling her into a tight hug. "And you make me feel better when I'm sad." Celestia paused for a moment before reaching up and hugging Luna back. "I love you, Tia." "I love you too, Luna," Celestia said, opening her eyes and looking back up at the moon. Philomena was silent, shifting slightly on her perch. I can't give up, Philomena. Luna may come back, and Equestria needs a leader in this time of strife." Philomena chirped. "Reforms can be made, Philomena. That's what Luna would want. And I must find a way to see if she is okay." Another chirp. "There is a difference between contacting and monitoring." Celestia rose, Philomena giving a small squawk as her resting place vanished. "Philomena, make sure that Napani disturbs me while I try and re-enter the warp." Philomena chirped as Celestia closed her eyes and opened her soul to the warp, putting up as many defenses as she could. Celestia steps quietly through the warp, approaching the source of power that was Luna. As many of her normal senses are stifled, she has no way of knowing whether Luna was alerted to her presence or not. Still, she presses on, reinforcing her mental defenses as she nears. "Luna," she calls, hoping for a response. When none comes, she reinforces her defenses and moves closer. "Luna, can you hear me?" "She cannot," a voice says from the shadows. Celestia turns and prepares for an attack as a man clad in silver Terminator armor approaches. "I wish that were not true, but you are still attuned to the normal flow of the warp." As Celestia sees his face, her spells almost drop. Her mind is awash with new thoughts and emotions, and she stumbles over what she should be feeling. "It can't be. Horus? You're alive." "In a sense. My physical body was destroyed, but I have spent quite a bit of time here," the former Warm Aster says, stopping a good distance away from Celestia. "I know that, but I destroyed you, body and soul. You can't be standing before me now." "I know, but something dragged me here and brought me to your sister just as she was beginning to fall to the temptations of chaos." "But who would be capable of something?" Celestia's eyes widen. "Discord. He said that he saved someone when I fought him." "That must have been you he was speaking of. He did not refer to himself as Discord when he pulled me from your grasp, but he did save me. I guess." Horus sighs. "I wish that he had saved you and let me die aboard that ship. It would be a fair price for the crimes I committed under the influence of the Chaos Gods." Celestia prepares to respond, but stops herself. This is not the same proud warrior she remembers, nor the ruthless traitor she slew during the heresy. Here is a man, coming forth and repenting for his past crimes. "I suppose I was wrong about some things, Horus. I do not wish to sound rude, Horus, but why are you here?" There is silence before Horus speaks again. "I wanted to talk with you, Emperor. I wanted you to know that I am sorry for what I did to you, Sanguinius, the Imperium, all of mankind. I allowed myself to break, I lost faith in my brothers and in you, our leader." "But Horus No." Horus raises a hand. "I am at fault here, Emperor. I hope that you can forgive me for what I have done. And if you do not, then I understand." Celestia can feel tears welling up in her eyes, her composure slowly cracking. "No, Horus. You have nothing to be sorry for." I. Celestia reaches her breaking point, her tears flowing more freely now. "Oh Horus." She races forward towards her favored son, tossing her forelegs around him and sobbing. "I'm sorry, Horus. Everything was my fault. I drove Lorgar towards chaos after I humiliated him. I did not trust you with knowledge of my plans for humanity. The heresy, your fall, everything was my fault." She keeps sobbing even as Horus reaches up to comfort her. "But I willingly chose to follow chaos instead of seeking out a better alternative. You cannot take the blame for that. But I drove you to that point. I should be responsible for that. And now I have driven Luna there as well, and she may be lost forever because of my neglect." She pulls Horus in closer. "I have done so much wrong in my life, all because I thought that I was never wrong. Had I just swallowed my pride once, you would still be alive and the Imperium would not have fallen. But I didn't. Oh Horus, can you ever forgive a stupid, arrogant old mare for everything she has done?" There is silence in the warp, Celestia straining her ears for a sound. "I already have, Father." Celestia smiles before breaking away from Horus. "Can you help me free Luna?" "I cannot. The elements of harmony, as your sister called them, have blunted my powers in the warp. I can communicate with her, though, and am more than willing to stay with her until you can find a way to free her. I suppose that is fair." Celestia takes a moment to compose herself. Will I ever see you again?" There is silence. "Perhaps. I may be powerful, but I am still one soul lost amongst the Immaterium. But I promise you, on my word as a soldier and a friend, I will try to reach you as much as possible." Celestia nods before Horus speaks again. "And you? What will you do until you find a way to release your sister?" "I have a few ideas." Celestia set aside her quill, reaching out with a small amount of her magic to brush away the excess ink. Her conversation with Horus had reinvigorated her, dozens of new ideas to rule Equestria better flowing through her mind. She looked the document over a few times before turning to Philomena, the phoenix sitting on a stool at the other end of the room. "I believe this will be sufficient for now, don't you agree?" she asked. Philomena chirped a few syllables. "I'm glad you agree, it's a start, and there are a few issues to iron out, but it's better than nothing." She raised the document up to the light, inspecting every word to make sure it was right. Imperial Order Number 41. By order of Her Serene Majesty Celestia. War Mistress Luna is innocent of all crimes committed by the traitor Nightmare Moon. The Lunar Knights are to be reformed and renamed the Night Guard, with the Unicorn Silverlight acting as the new Legion's Supreme Grand Master. The Drake Guard, Black Ravens, and Night Warriors are hereby disbanded, and shall be replaced with new legions at a later date. All other legions that served under Nightmare Moon, but have returned to my service, shall be reorganized under my watch. Reprimands will be determined at a later date. The capital shall be moved permanently to Canterlot, and the ever-free site shall remain unsettled in respect of War Mistress Luna's sacrifice. Until their location is verified, the Empress Chosen Legion shall not be declared excommunicate traitores. 1 month from today, elections shall be held in the 20 provinces of Equestria. Each province shall elect 2 officials to serve in a cabinet I shall arrange. Legion commanders are advised to monitor the voting and punish any signs of corruption. I shall observe the legions to make sure they are fulfilling their duties. I, Celestia, hereby renounce my title of Empress of Equestria. With this, I shall relinquish certain duties to the cabinet and the citizens of Equestria. A school of magic shall be founded in Canterlot, in the hopes that its students will learn to use their powers in such a way that a similar crisis can be averted. Celestia smiled before rolling up the document and passing it to Philomena. Take this to the scribes and have them make a copy for each town in Equestria. I want every pony to hear this as soon as possible. Philomena nodded before taking the scroll in her talons, cawing and flying out the window. Once she was sure Philomena was gone, Celestia turned her attention to the closet on the other end of the room, wherein her armor was set. Her eyes traced every curve, etching, and scratch on her armor, and she smiled as fond memories of her time before Equestria came back into view. Forging her armor, raising Luna, battling the Wendigos, all these were memories she would enjoy visiting. A new future was opening up, and she hoped that many more fond memories would be made. "My lady!" She turned as one of her guards entered and bowed. "My lady, the filly mimic Sparkle has arrived from Maynaden and is waiting outside. Show her in, please." The guard bowed and exited the room, Celestia turning back to her armor and reaching out with her magic. "I might miss my time as Empress. But I think I'll grow out of it." With that, Princess Celestia closed the door on her past and stepped forward into the future. "Wait, that's it?" Twilight asked. "Everything that's important, Twilight," Celestia said, standing and beginning to remove her armor. "You are a quick study, and I am sure you've read about all the time and events that have passed since that day." "Well, yes, but what about Luna? You couldn't have just left her there for all this time. And those other ponies, the ones that followed Nightmare Moon, what happened to them? I suppose I shall have to tell you those things someday." Celestia smiled as she set aside the last of her armor. "However, now is not the time. It's getting late, and you need your rest." "What? I'm not tired." As if on cue, Twilight let out one of the biggest yawns a filly of her size was capable of. I think I need a nap." "Of course you do, silly filly," Cadance said, levitating Twilight onto her back. "You need to rest up if you're going to spend all of tomorrow studying." "I guess," Twilight yawned again and snuggled into Cadance's back. "Good night, Princess." "Now wait, Twilight." Celestia took a step forward. "If it's all right with you, may I come and see you to bed?" Twilight blinked, more from sleepiness than surprise, before smiling. "Of course, Princess." Celestia smiled wider and moved to follow Cadance and Twilight. Shining Armor was silent before reaching for his helmet. I should probably get back," he said. "Steel Rain really doesn't like us being late. I will speak to him on this matter, Corporal, and I suppose I should ask him to focus more on combined arms and less on Pegasi." Shining let out a small chuckle before turning to Cadance and Twilight. "Hey, Twily, you be a good little filly, okay?" "Sure thing, BBBFF." Twilight chirped. "When are you and Cadance going to go out?" Both Cadance and Shining failed to suppress their blushes, and Celestia had to hold a hoof to her mouth to stifle her laugh. Shining looked to Cadance, then to Celestia, then back to Cadance. Real I should get going by Cadance." Shining gave a hurried salute and fled from the room, leaving a very confused Twilight and a very embarrassed Cadance behind. "I thought he liked you," Twilight said, poking Cadance in the back of the head. Was all Cadance could say before Celestia intervened. "I think we've had enough excitement for one night. Now come, Twilight, you need to go to bed." Twilight did not protest, instead nodding as Celestia and Cadance led her out of the room. As they walked, Celestia looked over at Cadance. "You know, Shining Armor is a very nice colt." "Not you too, Auntie!" Cadance cried. "I have enough trouble from Twilight, I don't need you egging her on." Now, Cadance, remember that you would most likely not be alive if it weren't for Shining Armor." Twilight raised an eyebrow at this. "What's that supposed to mean?" the little filly asked. "Well," Celestia fluffed her wings before continuing. "Cadance's parents have been in my service for quite some time, and had tried for an equally long time to have a foal, but they were unsuccessful. Her mother and your mother had been friends for a little while before your brother was born, and when he was her mother came to me and admitted that she saw it as unfair that your mother could have a child while she could not. I took pity on her and reached into the warp, finding a strong yet errant soul and placing it inside her. 11 months later, Cadance was born." "It's a little more complicated than that, Twilight," Cadance said. "I'll explain it when you're older." Twilight pouted a little, but gave up when she realized Celestia and Cadance were not going to give in. They walked in silence before Twilight started asking questions again. "Princess?" "Yes, Twilight," Celestia replied. "If you haven't freed Luna yet," Twilight shuffled around a little. "Do you think she'll ever come back?" Celestia did not answer right away. Instead, she looked out one of the large windows they were passing by. From here, she could see Canterlot and Equestria turning in for the night, the lights of shops and houses flickering out one by one. High above, she could see the moon, and the so-called mare in the moon that was the only mark of her sister's existence. Some ponies regarded the image with trepidation, fearing whatever lay beyond the image. But Celestia knew different, and she hoped that some like Twilight would also understand. She did not see it as a symbol of fear, but one of hope, that someday Luna would be free and Equestria would be fully reunited. Yes, she said, smiling once again. I know she will. The end.